Hello everybody, we're here today, you're watching Irikoze on YouTube, and we're here today to talk about David Coffin, who you see there, and Scott Davis, who you see there, and also the dishonest nature of Megan Bruton, who you saw there. This is a wholly circumstantial case that hinges on the fact that Megan manipulated the situation, and Scott may very well be innocent. So we're going to go over some of those things here today and in videos to come. Hello everybody, we're back today. We're talking a little bit about Scott Davis again. Some of you heard me in a recent video mentioning Scott Davis, and that there was a show that was going to be doing a show, a broadcast about the Scott Davis case, and I thought that they had scrapped it. Turned out literally the day after I did that video, people were going, "Oh my God, I've seen it. It's on right now. It's on ID on Investigation Discovery." So it's, so it actually did air. So it's out there and exists now. It's, like I said, it's on a show called Reasonable Doubt, which is on the Investigation Discovery Network. So wherever, on your cable, wherever, you tune into Investigation Discovery on your particular cable service. But anyways, it's a show called Reasonable Doubt. Now, I personally have never ever seen this show before. This is the first time that I ever saw this show or was even aware of it. It's an interesting show. It has an interesting premise, and it basically starring two people. One is Chris Anderson. He is like a former detective, a retired detective, homicide detective, and part of his opening spiel in the show, part of the first thing that you hear from him in the opening sequence is that he's been a homicide investigator or whatever, but he does know that police or law enforcement don't always get it right. So he admits that he's aware that happens. So which obviously sets him up for being on this show, right? Because you got to have an open mind when you're dealing with potential wrongful convictions. I just would point out that this show is not called Guilt or Innocence or anything like that. This show is called Reasonable Doubt. Okay, we all know what reasonable doubt is, correct? Reasonable doubt means if there's reason that you have trouble believing that for instance, in this case, that say Scott did this, then that means, or if there's reasons why you can't quite fully get on board with it, then that creates a reasonable doubt. So it's not quite the same as guilt or innocence. It's not as polarized. Reasonable doubt kind of happens somewhere in the middle of those. I went into this show expecting that they were going to highlight the problems in this case. I will say this show did that. They did highlight the problems in this case big time, and they actually showed the proof right on screen of how bogus the claims made by the prosecution were in certain respects. Where I felt they came up short, though, is that they didn't really fully go in to the leads that they were given by Scott Davis's dad and his brother. So these leads that they were given were, to my mind, very strong, but then there's two of them that they ended up, finding were a little bit shaky. Well, that's fine. I'm willing to admit, that, yeah, it's possible that Scott could have done this. It's possible that he could have done it, maybe. Although it's a little bit sketchy because he had literally about a 31-minute window, I think it was, 31-minute window from when he was in between phone calls at his house that he would have had to leave, go and burn down Coffin's house, and then come all the way back to his house. And so this is the issue, and this would have been during traffic hour, like 7 o'clock at night. So this would have been in traffic time. And so there's like this 31-minute window where Scott could have done this. They don't cover that. They don't even talk about that. But what some of the things that get brought up are, number one, the amount of lost evidence in the Scott Davis case. They tell Fatima Silva, who is the defense lawyer, or former defense lawyer, who's the other co-star of this show. They basically tell her that 70 pieces of evidence were lost. Well, she goes and looks into that, finds out that it's not 70, it's actually only 50, but she admits herself in the show that doesn't really make it any much, it doesn't make it very much better. It's still actually atrocious, and it's really inexcusable no matter what. Oh, they did leave out one thing about that evidence, though. That missing evidence. They went over the fact that the murder weapon was in there, and they went over the fact that the latent prints were among that. But what they didn't say is that the blood that was suspected to be the actual killer's blood was also among that evidence that was lost. And Detective Chambers tested that DNA, and when it didn't come back as Scott's, he shuffled it away, and then it ended up getting lost. He didn't run it through CODIS. Had he run it through CODIS, who knows, might have gotten a hit. But he didn't want a hit. He didn't want anything that pointed away from his suspect, because it was all about a tunnel vision. So that's the problem there. I wish they would have mentioned it, because it's important. When you have what you think is the killer's blood and that just gets filed away and lost, that's significant. All right, so then they talk about the Porsche Fire. Okay, the Porsche Fire is something that Scott couldn't have done. In fact, I'll leave you a link here to the drive time video, where somebody on a Sunday afternoon, when there's minimal traffic, nothing like it would be at rush hour, nothing at all like it would be during, like, you know, lunchtime on a Tuesday. So on about basically a Sunday afternoon, about, you know, 4 o'clock or so, we have somebody driving from Scott's building, not even having to descend from the 26th floor or whatever it was where Scott worked, but just driving from the building to the spot where the Porsche burned. And it took like almost 20 minutes. And there's no way that Scott could have gotten over there and gotten back in time, because he only had about a 15-minute window in which he could have driven over there, burned this Porsche, and driven back to work to be seen, because he was at work. There was people verifying that he was there, right? And the prosecution's trying to squeeze him into this you know, Porsche fire, you know, somehow making it his fault. So when they realized that his, you know, alibi for the Porsche fire was going to be so unassailable, you know, and in light of the fact that he literally only had like a 31-minute window in which to drive over to Coffin's house, kill him, burn in the house, or to go over there, burn the house down and all that stuff. He only had, I mean, the window is small, it's tight. So then you have this where they're trying to pin the Porsche fire on him. It's impossible, because in the show they show that the prosecution tried to claim it was set by maybe a time device that was meant to go off sometime later. Well, we found out that couldn't be, because of the type of fire that it was. He went to an arson investigator, and they found out that it was called it was basically what they call a splash and dash, where they splash the gasoline up on the hood, and then they basically throw most of the time it's probably a cigarette, because the cigarette will stay lit as you throw it through the air, and then, you know, boom, throw a cigarette at it, and it lights on fire, and it burns up the whole hood, and that creates like the burn pattern that we see on the Porsche in this case. For those of you who have not seen a whole lot about this case, just go to my channel, go up to my videos, go into the search thing to search my videos, and type in Scott Davis, and it's going to bring you up a list of probably about 15, 16 videos. And, you know, you can start with the ones that talk about, you know, like Megan or Rick Chambers, the co-lead detective in this case, and stuff like that. And it'll help you kind of get up to speed and get to understanding the characters involved here. So I'll leave links to some of those videos down below, particularly the one that's blocked in Australia, because guess who lives there? Megan Bruton, who, by the way, is the one who gave Scott the information that David had been shot. See, and they talk about that here, and it kind of got me crazy listening to them talk about it, because they realize how you really can't deny the fact that Megan had this knowledge of David being shot while the house was still burning. How did she have this information? Seriously? Because it's so obvious and so proven that it's obvious that Megan had this information before she should have had it, is the biggest reason why I'm still supporting Scott Davis. It's not the only reason, but it's the biggest. It's really the biggest, because for me, I can't. Well, I'll remind you of something that was said by Miss Sheila Ross, the prosecutor of this case, assistant district attorney of Fulton County. She told the jury in her closing statement. Now, keep in mind, during the trial, they were not able to track down all of the phone records. They weren't able to find this call that Megan made to Scott. Well, it turns out, after trial, they ended up finding where that call came from. It was actually at David Coffin's neighbor's house. They eventually got those phone records, and they were able to put times to the calls that Megan made. And they have her calling her friend Jennifer Janikova at 12:10. They have her calling Scott Davis at 12:18. There's David's best friend, who Craig Foster, happened to be right there and heard her on the phone at the neighbor's house telling somebody that David had been shot. Jennifer Janikova's boyfriend, when Megan called Jennifer, when that happened, the boyfriend was like, "Oh, how does she know? If the house is burning, how does she know that?" I mean, it stuck out to people when she and when they were asking Megan about it, how do you know that? How do you know that? She jumped around from topic to topic and wouldn't, basically wouldn't get pinned down, acting very cagey. You know what I mean? And so these things add up to something. This means that, okay. So what Miss Ross said in her closing statement, she told the jury that if they're in a case like this, that's a circumstantial evidence case, which the case against Scott Davis fully is, a completely circumstantial case, that you have to rule out the guilt of all other parties save the defendant. Okay, how many people, tell me in the comments, how many people believe that everybody else's guilt has been ruled out? I'll leave you the link to the Megan video that proves that she made all these calls, the proof of the people that testified saying they heard her say this, and all these things that got ignored. The other thing, so when Fatima is talking about this to Scott's father, about Megan and this knowledge about, David being shot in the head, and she's talking to Scott's dad, she says that she in the court transcripts that David's best friend and his best friend's girlfriend had basically testified to the fact that they heard Megan saying those things at the times that the phone records show. So that means you have corroboration of it from the victim's friend. You realize how ironclad and rock solid that makes this information? And it was ignored. It was just ignored. Another little thing that she left out. Poor Fatima. You seem to have missed something, because you guys talked about how when Scott said that in his interrogation about that David had been shot in the head, and you talked about the fact that Rick Chambers left the interrogation room, and you talked about the fact that he went over and asked Megan if she had said this. Oh, she denied it. Oh, what a shock. What a shocker. If you knew about Megan and her level of dishonesty, you wouldn't be shocked by that. But anyways, here's what they missed. Rick Chambers also went over and asked Craig Foster, David Coffin's friend. You remember that guy I was just talking about? Rick Chambers also went over and asked him. And Rick Chambers said that he told, or I'm sorry, Craig Foster says that he told Rick Chambers, basically, yes, I heard her say something about David being shot in the head on the telephone around that time or whatever. He confirmed what Scott was telling Rick Chambers. Rick Chambers basically just takes Megan's word for it, walks right back into the interrogation room and goes right after Scott again. So if he wanted to have Scott as a suspect, that's fine. But at that point in time, Megan didn't become a suspect, and she sure as damn well should have. And because because here's the thing that bugged the heck out of me when they were talking about, you know, this whole thing about Megan knowing about David being shot in the head. And Chris says, he actually asks, you know, Scott's dad at the beginning when they're talking about how, because Scott said this, that the investigators focused in on him and everything like that. And Chris goes, well, you do understand why that made Scott a suspect, right? Yeah, Chris, we all understand why that made Scott a suspect. Here's the question. Why didn't it make Megan a suspect? That's the question. Why is that question not being asked by you? I don't know. It should have been. But you guys do concede that part looks to be that lead checked out. That means 3 of Scott's leads check out of the 5. Then we move on to the basically where they question the prosecution's motive, or at least what the prosecution said Scott's motive was. Now, I personally think that that's not really a strong area in their case. I think Scott was broken up about Megan. I think he really did want her back. I think he was in some pain about it. He was writing her letters and calling her and acting like a freaking nutcase. But he was still young. He was still just a couple years out of college. So, I mean, this kind of immature behavior is not all that shocking. But they use this whole immature thing of him being obsessed to basically say that they think Scott's guilty. They don't actually come out and say that, but they're insinuating it. Their body language is saying it. Some of the way that they word things kind of insinuates it. They're clever. They're clever about it. They don't just come right out and say it. But the way they kind of leave it is like, look, we think that these things are completely bogus. They scream out, you know, something's wrong here. But then again, because of, you know, the fact that Scott was, you know, obsessed with Megan and didn't want to lose her and all that stuff, and because of his alibi 911 calls that he made. Scott has always claimed that he had an intruder in his house twice on the day that David Coffin's house burned down. Once earlier on in the day, somebody came and he says they tried to steal his car and it went all wrong and everything. And then later on, he says the same person came back to burn his house. Well, here's the thing, folks. Because I felt like, I mean, number one, yes, that doesn't look altogether great for Scott. The story seems weird and odd and strange. And usually when things get real weird and odd and strange, you get what guys like Chris Anderson do. They immediately go, nope, okay, wait, whoa. Weird, odd, and strange means nope, that's it. He did it. You know? And that's the way Chris feels. I can respect that. That's fine. Chris has also got a lot of real-world experience that, you know, with investigating murders and stuff that I don't have. So, you know, I'm willing to kind of give the tip of the hat to, you know, he's the experienced investigator. But the thing here is that if you look in deeper to this case, you'll find out that Fatima is not exactly correct when she says that the relationship with David and Megan was escalating. It's not actually correct. That's not actually true. The actual truth of the matter is David was looking to distance himself from Megan. He had found a new lady that he was interested in. Her name was Jennifer. And she was, blonde and beautiful, and I mean, all that. And it looks like in the, last couple weeks of his life, he was really calling her a lot. Yeah, he was still talking to Megan. He spent the night over at her house one day on the weekend before this all, happened, before he died and all that. Look, and I'm not saying anything about David. David, he was a playboy. Okay? Self-proclaimed, that was his lifestyle. So for everybody to be making this like connection that like somehow him and Megan were escalating, I don't think so. And you only have to look at, and I'm not even going to tell you what it is, but if you're really interested, if you're an investigator and you're really interested, find out who the last call that David made from his home phone. Find out who it was to. That will lead you to the person that David was really interested in at the time of his death. So, and this is corroborated by somebody who was a friend of David's, used to date him, but they didn't date anymore. But she talked to him quite often and stuff like that, and she confirms the fact that David was talking about this girl that I'm talking about right now, the blonde-haired girl named Jennifer. So I think Megan realized that she was going to be getting replaced. Okay? There's a lot of reasons why that I believe this. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why. You know that Megan and David Coffin were supposed to be shopping for a Christmas tree for Megan on Monday, the day before David, his house burns down, right? Well, that afternoon on Monday, Tuesday is when his house burns down, but in the afternoon on Monday, he was supposed to be helping Megan go get a Christmas tree. Instead of that, Megan's running around with this other guy named Clayton. And they like run around and they're calling each other. They're like, but yeah, they're not, I mean, she's not going to David Coffin's house and hey, let's go get that Christmas tree. She's instead hanging out with somebody else. So why is that? If this is the guy that your relationship is escalating with, and you guys are getting all, into each other, and you've got plans to go get the Christmas tree, why weren't you over there getting the Christmas tree that you had planned to go get with that person you love and whose relationship, it was all heating up? So why weren't see, that's the part where I have problems. Megan's timeline and story and nothing about it works for me. Yeah, there's issues with Scott, but there's a lot more with Megan. A buttload more with Megan if you really look into it. So, I will say this though. This show did show that 3 out of the 5 leads were bang on. Right on the head. You can't deny them. Now, the final 2, not so ironclad. But, the fact of the matter is the guilty knowledge that David had been shot is what got the investigators looking at Scott in the first place. Why weren't they looking at Megan when it was being said that the information came from her? When that was being claimed and you had the victim's best friend confirming it, why is it she was ignored? So, was she possibly jealous when she found out about the new girl that David was talking to? Did she go into a fit of rage because she had just thrown away her marriage and was running into this man's arms because she thought he was going to be the solution to all of her problems, and she was going to be able to finally live that high life that she wanted, that maybe she felt Scott couldn't provide, or whatever it may be? But then all of a sudden found out that she wasn't on as strong ground with him as she thought, and that he was talking to other girls that are pretty, and girls that are, you know what I mean? And maybe it just, she picked up a gun and did something stupid, then didn't know what to do because he was shot on Monday night. Yeah, he was shot on Monday night. The last call that he makes on his home phone is at like 6:19, and it's to the girl that I'm telling you about. And suddenly he ends up dead. And then the next day, for some reason, whoever did it waits an entire day and then comes back and burns the house down. So this is odd, especially when you think about the fact that Megan wasn't Christmas tree shopping and was instead hanging out with this guy Clayton pretty much from the Monday evening all the way up until pretty much talking on the phone constantly all the way up until the fire at David's house. So that's odd, you know, because if they were so in love, why weren't they Christmas tree shopping? Right? So this is the credible things that I look at in this case and go, there's a problem here. All that evidence didn't get lost on accident. They didn't want to. Here's what I honestly believe happened with the state, with the way Fulton County and the district attorney's office went with this. They decided not to pursue it in '98 or whatever. Then up and coming, you know, young lawyer, you know, comes up into the Fulton County DA's office. She's made the assistant district attorney. She's put in charge of the cold case unit. And the first case she pulls out is this case with two very wealthy, you know, families, well-to-do, you know, families kind of thing. And she pulls that out to be the first case she's going to go after. And suddenly Scott's getting arrested in California and brought back to Georgia and all that stuff. Now, the thing is why did they go after Scott instead of Megan, right? Well, the reason was simple. They were barely able to float this over the net with the jury on Scott. I mean, they were barely able to get this conviction. There was a lot of people thought the jury was going to be hung. I mean, it came down to the wire, and basically you can guarantee it was a very, you know, not an easy decision to make, because like I said, they took all the possible time they could. And that's what I mean by they barely floated this one over the line. You know what I mean? They barely floated it over the net. I guarantee you, if they had tried to prosecute a woman for it, it would have been a complete waste of time and money, and they wouldn't have even bothered. Because juries, it's very difficult to get juries to convict women. They have trouble believing that these women did these things. It's a known phenomenon. So that's why I believe they just had to latch on to Scott, and then they just had to hold on because they really didn't have a choice. Like I said, I doubt they would have gotten a conviction against Megan because she is a woman, and just juries are just notoriously, you know, easy or lenient on women, especially ones like Megan, who will get up there and put on the waterworks and do all the emotional things and tug at your heartstrings and do all those things that Megan does. They find it even harder to do. So just as a rule of thumb. So I guarantee you that they didn't want to bother wasting the time and the money and the effort to go after Megan. They felt that their best chance was to go after Scott. That's really the way it looks to me, because they are willfully ignoring this obvious fact that Megan is the one that knew David was shot while the house was burning. There's really no way around this. She knew he was shot while the house was burning. Until somebody can come up with a good reason for why that happened, Scott should not be sitting in a cell. It's unfortunate that reasonable doubt couldn't help Scott, but I do thank them for bringing awareness to Scott's case, even though I felt you guys were a little bit kind of, I don't know. I didn't like the way that you were trying to tell Scott's dad that Scott needs to make peace with his past and all that stuff. No. Megan did a number on him. Megan destroyed a lot of lives because she wanted the finer things in life. She wanted what she wanted, and if she couldn't have that, then she was gonna throw a tantrum. That's what we're dealing with here. Megan and her tantrums, and Scott, unfortunately, being still kind of young and dumb and stupid and just couldn't let go. And, you know, now he's paying the price for not being able to let go. It's not the price he should be paying. But, and where's Megan now? Oh, well, she married an Australian guy. And she now lives in Australia. And she's over there working to get my videos blocked in Australia so that nobody over there can see what she's up to from what she did over here in the States. So, like I said, she has had one of my videos blocked. So, in Australia only. Everybody else, if you're not in Australia, you can see it. It's called The Dishonest Nature of Megan Bruton. I'll leave a link to it down below here. Yeah, so that's what I got to say about this case. So, for those of you on my channel who have sat here and listened to me this whole time, this show was pretty good. It was decent. It was, and like I said, for the main 3 points, like the Porsche Fire, the missing evidence, and the fact that Megan is the one who possessed the guilty knowledge that David had been shot in the head while the house was still burning, they illustrated those three pretty well. Very well. The problem is that I still struggle with the whole thing about Scott getting attacked twice. I do. I struggle with that. But the thing is now is that when I've come to think about it, and what I know now about this girl that David was pursuing, who was not Megan, I wonder if, because Megan had just, basically got away from her husband, decided he wasn't, doing it or wasn't going to be able to, whatever it was, it wasn't working there, right? So then she moves him away. He's annoying the crap out of her, which he shouldn't have been doing, but he was. He was annoying the living daylights out of her. And then all of a sudden she finds out her new beau, the one that she really likes and the one that she thinks is, the one, and maybe walks in on him calling this girl and talking and leaving a message on her machine about, I don't know, maybe some of the things he wants to do to her or whatever. I don't know. I don't know what it might have been. It might have just been he was leaving a message for a girl that was completely innocent and she just snapped because she knew he was talking to a girl. All I'm saying is that would then kind of make sense that if she snapped on Monday and killed him with, pulled out a gun, his gun or whatever gun, and killed him, it would explain why it was left for a day, because she didn't know what to do. She did it and didn't know what to do. And then for an entire day was trying to figure out what to do. And that could be why she maybe sent somebody to go steal some things from Scott to try to be able to put some of his things at David's house to try to incriminate him. And, these sort of things. I'm just saying it's a possibility. I'm not saying that is what happened. I'm just saying that is a possibility of what these attacks on Scott could be. So I don't know. Anyways, it's a very, very strange thing. But the fact of the matter is, Megan is at the center of this, and that's why she's in Australia. Okay, and Scott sits in a cell. There's more to this story, and we didn't get it. And the investigators, once again, just like in another case some of you on this channel may be aware of, the investigators did not get at it. They didn't want to. They had what they wanted, and they didn't want to look at anything else. So, I think I'm done talking about Scott Davis today, folks. If you want, go ahead and check out that show, Reasonable Doubt. I'll leave you a link to the website where you can watch it. You have to be able, you have to have it on your cable anyways, to be able to enter your credentials into the website to be able to watch it. So if you have a cable box, you might be able to just go and search through your DVR there. But or if you don't have the ability to do video on demand on yours, then yeah, you can just, as long as you have Investigation Discovery Channel on your cable service, you can get it. There's a pin, like a user and a pin that you can get, and you can go to this website and you can type it in and you'll be able to watch the show. So I'll leave a link to Reasonable Doubt's website for those of you who are interested. And like I said, the Scott Davis case is a mess. There's a lot more that we need to know about what was going on here, and trust me, that's why Megan is so far away in Australia, and getting on YouTube's case to make my videos, to deactivate my videos in Australia, basically. So anyways, but that's all right. Let her go. Let her rail on. Let her come after me. So That's about it for today, folks. We'll see you later. If you haven't already, please hit subscribe.